This is a developing story that strikes at the heart of one of the most scrutinized relationships in modern American political history, a narrative that has intertwined the highest levels of power with one of the darkest criminal sagas of our time. We are following a significant statement coming directly from former President Donald Trump, who has issued a forceful and categorical denial regarding any involvement in the illicit activities of the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. In a climate where speculation often outpaces fact, this latest development serves as a definitive line in the sand drawn by Trump himself, aiming to shut down a renewed cycle of allegations and media inquiries. The statement, which addresses the swirling rumors head-on, is not just a simple rebuttal. It is a detailed reassertion of a timeline that his legal team and supporters have highlighted for years. Trump is doubling down on the narrative that his relationship with Epstein was purely social, superficial, and, crucially, terminated long before the federal justice system began to close in on the disgraced financier. This is breaking news because, despite the passage of time, the public fascination with the Epstein list and the powerful men associated with it has not waned. By addressing this now, Trump is attempting to control the narrative before it can be weaponized in the court of public opinion. What makes this moment particularly volatile is the context in which this denial arrives. We are living in an era where the unsealing of court documents and the resurfacing of old flight logs are treated as major political events. Within this high-stakes environment, Donald Trump's assertion is clear. He claims to be one of the few powerful figures who actually banned Epstein from his properties, rather than embracing him. He is stating, for the record, that he cut ties years before the arrest that eventually led to Epstein's death behind bars. This distinction, the timing of this break, is the cornerstone of his defense and the focal point of this unfolding story. As the dust settles on this latest announcement, the question that remains for the American public is not just about what happened 2 decades ago, but how this history is being interpreted today. The urgency of this news lies in its implications for the future. It challenges the media and the public to look at the timeline of events with fresh eyes. This is not merely a celebrity gossip column item. It is a matter of historical record involving a former commander-in-chief. As we move past the initial headline, we must now peel back the layers of decades-old social alliances to understand exactly what cutting ties meant in the gilded world of Palm Beach, and why this specific detail matters more now than ever before. To understand the gravity of this denial, we have to step out of the frenetic pace of the breaking news cycle and transport ourselves back to a different era. We need to look at the 1990s and early 2000s, specifically in Palm Beach, Florida. This was a time and place defined by excess, exclusivity, and a very specific social hierarchy. It was a world where billionaires, celebrities, and socialites moved in the same tight-knit circles, attending the same galas, and appearing in the same society pages. It was here, amidst the manicured lawns and oceanfront estates, that the paths of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein crossed. The narrative, often presented in tabloids, suggests a deep, inseparable bond. But the reality, as painted by this recent statement and historical context, is far more complex. There is no denying that they knew each other. Photographs from that era show them together at Mar-a-Lago, smiling, appearing to enjoy the camaraderie of the ultra-wealthy. Trump has previously remarked that Epstein was a lot of fun to be around, a quote that has been replayed endlessly by his critics. However, purely social proximity in the insulated world of the super-rich does not inherently equate to complicity in criminal behavior. This is the nuance that the current statement seeks to clarify, that being in the same room is not the same as being involved in the same activities. The documentary evidence of their relationship suggests a dynamic of 2 powerful men navigating the same social ecosystem. They were neighbors in a literal and metaphorical sense, occupying the upper echelons of Florida society. Yet, looking closer at the timeline, cracks in this relationship appeared much earlier than the general public realizes. While the media often lumps all of Epstein's associates into a single category of enablers, the timeline Trump is standing on suggests a divergence. The claim is that while others continued to fly on Epstein's private jet and visit his private island well into the late 2000s, Trump's interaction with Epstein had already chilled significantly. This brings us to the pivotal moment that anchors Trump as defense, the alleged banning of Jeffrey Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. According to the narrative supported by Trump and various reports from that period, the relationship did not end because of the federal charges that would come later. It ended over a personal and professional dispute. The story goes that the rift was caused by a real estate conflict or, according to some accounts, an incident involving a staff member's daughter at the club. Regardless of the specific catalyst, the result was a hard severance of ties. This is a critical piece of the puzzle because it establishes a distance between Trump and Epstein years before the 2008 plea deal that first exposed Epstein guess crimes to the world. If we analyze the timeline scrupulously, this break is the shield Trump wields against the barrage of accusations. When the first wave of serious allegations against Epstein became public, Trump was reportedly no longer in his orbit. This stands in stark contrast to other high-profile figures who maintained contact, funding, and friendship with Epstein, even after his initial conviction. By emphasizing this early departure, Trump is positioning himself not just as innocent of the crimes, but as someone who saw through Epstein's facade, or at least found him intolerable, long before it was politically convenient to do so. However, the shadow of Jeffrey Epstein is long and dark, and mere distance is often not enough to silence skepticism. For the American audience, the skepticism stems from the sheer volume of connections Epstein cultivated. The public has seen the flight logs. They have seen the names of presidents, princes, and scientists. In this crowded field of associates, Trump's denial is an attempt to isolate himself from the herd. He is effectively saying, I knew him, I realized who he was, and I threw him out. This narrative frames the former president as decisive rather than complicit, a characterization that aligns with his broader political brand. As we delve deeper into the mechanics of this denial, it is essential to look at the legal ramifications. Over the years, attorneys representing victims have deposed dozens of individuals and combed through thousands of pages of documents. Throughout this exhaustive legal process, Trump has maintained this consistent stance. He has stated under oath and in public forums that he was not part of the inner circle that participated in Epstein and his predatory operations. The consistency of this story is what his team relies on. In a world where stories often shift under pressure, the narrative of the early fallout has remained a constant pillar of his defense strategy. But why does this resonate so powerfully right now? The answer lies in the current cultural moment. We are in a time of reckoning, where the past is constantly being excavated to judge the present. The Epstein saga has become a symbol of elite corruption and the failure of justice. For a figure like Donald Trump, who is constantly in the crosshairs of both political opponents and the media, any link to Epstein is a potential liability. By issuing this denial now, he is refusing to let his name be passively dragged into the mud along with those who stayed loyal to Epstein until the bitter end. This story also highlights the unique way the U.S. audience consumes news about power and corruption. There is a deep-seated curiosity, a need to know what happens behind closed doors. When a former president speaks about a figure like Epstein, it bridges the gap between political news and true crime documentary. It invites the viewer to play detective, to weigh the statement against the photographs, and to decide for themselves what the truth looks like. It is a story that refuses to die because the questions it raises, about who knew what and when, are fundamental to our understanding of justice. As we examine the years leading up to Epstein's arrest in 2019, the silence between the two men is notable. While Epstein was attempting to rehabilitate his image, courting academics and philanthropists, there is no public record of him returning to Trump's inner circle. This absence of later contact supports the claim of a severed relationship. It paints a picture of two paths that diverged sharply. One man went on to the White House, while the other descended into a spiral of infamy that ended in a jail cell. The contrast in their trajectories during the 2010s is a crucial element of the story that often gets lost in the noise of sensational headlines. Yet, the denial invites scrutiny. In the age of digital information, every claim is fact-checked in real time. Investigators and journalists have looked for holes in the cut ties story. They have analyzed flight manifests and phone records. Thus far, while social intersections in the 90s are undeniable, the smoking gun that would link Trump to Epstein's criminal activities during the peak of his predation has not surfaced in the public domain. This absence of evidence is what emboldens the denial. It allows the statement to be delivered not with hesitation, but with the force of a counterattack. We must also consider the human element of this story, the victims. For the women who survived Epstein's abuse, the constant parade of powerful men denying involvement can be a source of renewed pain. Every headline brings the trauma back to the surface. However, from a journalistic standpoint, distinguishing between those who were active participants and those who were merely social acquaintances is vital for the integrity of the truth. Trump's statement is an attempt to place himself firmly in the latter category, distancing himself from the abusers that the victims are so desperate to see held accountable. The narrative flow of this story is far from over. As new documents continue to be processed and released by courts, the validity of every denial by every powerful man is tested. Trump's assertion that he cut ties years before the arrest is currently standing as his barrier against the flood. It is a high-stakes gamble on the truth of his own timeline. If the timeline holds, it vindicates his claim of being unfairly grouped with Epstein's enablers. If new evidence were to ever contradict it, the political fallout would be cataclysmic. But for now, the statement stands as the definitive word from the former president. He was there, he saw, and he left. The consequences of this denial extend far beyond the courtroom and into the turbulent arena of American politics. In a nation deeply divided, this statement acts as a Rorschach test for the public. For his supporters, the denial and the timeline of the Mar-a-Lago ban serve as ultimate vindication, proof that he was the sole figure with the moral clarity to ostracize a predator when others remained silent. It reinforces the image of an outsider who, despite operating within the elite circles, never truly belonged to their darkest cliques. For his critics, however, the skepticism lingers, fueled by the sheer proximity of their past social lives. They argue that in the world of billionaires, social exclusion is rarely about morality and often about business or ego. Yet, without new material evidence to bridge the gap between social acquaintance and criminal conspiracy, the denial stands firm against the tide of speculation. This entire saga speaks to a much larger crisis of trust that currently grips the United States. The public fascination with the Epstein list is not merely about voyeurism. It is a symptom of a society that feels betrayed by its institutions and its icons. There's a collective hunger for accountability that has gone unsatisfied for too long. When a former president addresses these allegations, he is navigating a minefield of public perception where silence is interpreted as guilt and denial is dissected for the slightest inconsistency. By confronting the issue now, Trump is attempting to close a chapter that threatens to overshadow his political legacy, demanding that the public judge him on the facts of the timeline rather than the guilt by association that permeates social media. Ultimately, the story of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein is a study in diverging fates. It is a narrative about two men who once stood shoulder to shoulder in the sun-drenched hedonism of South Florida, only to end up in diametrically opposite realities, one commanding the attention of the world stage, the other dying in disgrace within a concrete cell. The assertion that ties were cut years before the fall is more than a legal defense. It is a claim to a different destiny. It suggests that at a critical juncture, a choice was made to step away from the abyss. Whether that choice was driven by prescience, personal conflict, or sheer luck is a question that historians and voters will continue to debate. As the news cycle inevitably moves on to the next breaking story, the weight of this denial remains. It sits in the public record, a definitive barrier erected against the ghosts of the past. The files may be unsealed and the names may be read aloud, but Donald Trump has drawn his line. In the end, this story serves as a stark reminder that in the corridors of power, the most dangerous secrets are often hidden in plain sight, and the truth is frequently defined by who is left standing to tell it. For now, the timeline is his testimony, and the silence of the past is his witness. And in the relentless court of public opinion, that may be the only verdict that truly matters.